Welcome to the Weekly Spark from Ignite Youth Group out of Eastgate Baptist Church, where we try to keep Christianity on fire in a world that tries to snuff it out. Hello there, gentlemen. Welcome to this week's Weekly Spark. We're going to get right into it and continuing our study in Proverbs, chapter 1, starting in verse 10. And here we come to the verse warning in Proverbs. And we need to make sure that when we see these warnings in Proverbs, we heed them, because they will protect us, as we'll see today. It says in verse 10, "My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not." So Solomon is writing to his son. He established why he wrote the book in the first verses 1 through 6. Verses 7 through 9 were the foundations of how to pursue wisdom, of fearing the Lord and listening to your parents and listening to those who are spiritually wiser, and making sure you are listening to them. But then he gives his first warning, because you can want to pursue wisdom, you can want to fear God, and you can want to listen to your parents. But if in verse 10, if you are enticed by sinners, then you're going to end up going the wrong way. There's a phrase that says, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." Why? Because you tend to be like those who are around you. So if all the people around you are ungodly, eventually you will be going their same way. So we need to make sure that when, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Do not agree to do what they said. And it says in verse 11, "If they say, 'Come with us, let us lay wait for blood. Let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them up alive as the grave, and whole as those that go down in the pit. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse.'" So he's saying, if sinners entice you, do not consent. And here, one of the big enticements in those verses is monetary gain. "Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse." So what Solomon is saying is, do not be enticed with sinners. Do not with what they're trying to get you to do. Why? Because in verse 15 it says, "My son, walk not down in the way with them. Refrain thy foot from their path, for their feet run to evil." If you agree to do what ungodly people around you are doing, it's going to go straight to evil. It's going to go straight to evil. So we need to make sure that we are not consenting to what they say. Now, there's an interesting word in verse 10, the first verse we looked at. "If sinners entice thee." Now, that word entice means attract or tempt by offering pleasure or advantage. Attract or tempt by offering pleasure or advantage. If you look at verse 17, it says, "Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird." And it's referencing to a hunter who's trying to catch a bird. And it's talking about a fowler who's trying to catch a bird with a net. And it's the same thing as if someone's going fishing, or even possibly, depending upon what kind of hunting someone's doing, is that, like with fishing, is that you put bait on the line and you cast it. And you cast your line into either the river or the lake or wherever you're fishing. And the reason you put the bait on is obviously so the fish sees it and gets enticed and tries to go for the bait. And then once you catch the fish, you reel them on up, and if you do catch and release, or you cook them, it's because, why? Because the fish was enticed. And it's the same thing there, is that it is, when you are enticed, there's going to be consequences. There's going to be consequences when you are enticed by sin. James 1 says, "But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed." There's that word again. "Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death." So when you are drawn away and enticed, and when you have sinners who put all these different things, all these different enticements in front of you, and you fall for it, there's going to be consequences. Because it says, "Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death." There's going to be consequences for when you follow your enticements. Here is just an example of that. Now, this is not sinful, but there have definitely been times where I've tried to lose weight. And when I've tried to lose weight, I try to be very clean, in what I'm eating. But I do have a couple weaknesses. Um, if I were to be somewhere and someone were to offer me, some desserts that are more fruit based, which is not necessarily my thing. I like some of them, but they're not really, and they're not my favorite. So I can either take them or leave them. And if I'm trying to be healthy, I can easily say no to them. But if someone were to bake me fresh, homemade chocolate chip cookies, which is probably one of my favorite things, I could eat 3 or 4 of them. And then, all the work I put in, it's going to be that much harder to lose weight. Why? Because I fell into what entices me. And the same thing, when you fall into something that entices you spiritually, it's going to bring forth consequences. It's going to bring forth consequences that you don't even know. So it's important to make sure that you are not enticed. And it says in verse 11, if they say, come with us, let us lay wait for blood. So let us lay wait for innocent blood. It says in verse 18, and they lay wait for their own blood. They lurk privily for their own lives. They didn't realize the consequences that were going to happen to them. And some people, when I've looked at verse 17, it says, surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. Some people are saying, the bird is not able to tell that there's danger. They just see what they're enticed by. They don't see the danger. And that's what happens to a lot of Christians who have gone the wrong way. They did not see the danger of following what they were enticed by. We need to make sure that we do not follow the way of this world, but instead follow God. But the wrong people can entice you. And when you're enticed, you need to make sure that you do not, that you say no to the temptation and you avoid their way. And it's because God loves you. He's trying to protect you, and going opposite is not. There's no protection there. So make sure when people are around you are trying to get you to sin, do not consent. That's our weekly spark for this week. Next week, because of being Labor Day weekend, we're not going to have a weekly spark. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good week. God bless.